I would like to acknowledge the Acting President of Cricket South Africa, who is also part of the Members' Council, Mr. Rihan Richards, who is on the panel for this press briefing as well. I'd like to acknowledge the officials from the Department of Sport, Arts and Culture, as well as representatives of the Members' Council, members of the media, the CSA Executive Committee as well. Now, this process has now run its due course. It seems that we're now at a point where we have arrived at a sustainable solution. I will not waste any further time, but just to hand over to the Cricket South Africa's acting president for his opening remarks. Over to you, Mr. Rihan Richards. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chaba. Allow me to welcome everybody, but allow me firstly to extend a special word of welcome to the Honourable Minister, Nathi Ntetwa, my colleague, Dr. Stavros Nikolai, the Executive of Cricket South Africa, ladies and gentlemen, and members of the press. As in the introduction, it has been said that this impasse has lasted 6 months. We have now arrived at a stage where we can formally announce that on the 27th of April, the Members' Council, by way of round-robin resolution in terms of Section 60 of the Companies Act, had voted to approve the MOI, and this was on a unanimous basis. We want to make it very clear that this document is now as a result of consensus. A lot of the time people think that consensus is by, what is the correct word, by compromise. This document is not a compromise. It was a negotiated process to which all parties have committed. We do believe that this document will now forge a way forward for South African cricket and for us as cricket to return to a state of hopefully the glories that we had in previous years. The process has been, I can say from a personal experience, has really been demanding. It has been on all the parties. And I want to say, there's always the question to us as members, what our intent was. When we met over the weekend post the failure of the special general meeting, there's a lot of actions that had happened, and it maybe have culminated in the matter on Sunday, which was quite a long and lengthy meeting. But it also taught us a lot of lessons, that if we talk directly, we can actually solve any problem. And I want to thank the Minister, as I had acknowledged in the Sportsfolio Committee this morning, the actions that has always been, up to last week, Minister, when you actually felt that you could no longer, was by consensus, and not in terms of any regulation. And I think we as the Members' Council, the question is, what was the overriding issue of why we had got to this position? The biggest pressure on us as cricket is to serve the game to the best of our ability. Cricket has so much to offer us as a nation. In the next couple of months, we all will have to realize that we're going to start a bidding process for World Cup cricket events. And that is why it's so important for us to unify and find a way forward. We've always enjoyed a very healthy relationship, despite what it might seem to people, between us and our national government, at the provincial level or at the local level. And I don't think that has changed. I think his Minister would also acknowledge that even during our impasses or our differences, we've always had this good relationship that existed between us, and I thank you for that. With that, Minister, I think I don't want to keep and hog the conversation. I will hand back to you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much, Mr. Richards. So It's been a long time, and the country has held its breath for long enough, and hopefully this is the time to exhale. Finally. I'd like to hand over to the chairman of the interim board, Dr. Stavros Nicolaou. Please, thank you.
Program Director Masechaba, Honourable Minister, Minister Nati Mtetwa, Acting President of the Members' Council, Mr. Rion Richards, executives of Cricket South Africa, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, and in particular members of the media. Remember the date 30th of April 2021. It is a seminal date in the history and evolution of cricket in our country. It will go down as a historical date because forever and from today, cricket will be placed on a different, solid, sound governance pathway. One which makes us proud as an organization, one which the rest of our country can take pride in, and more particularly, one that we can showcase, as we did with our constitution many years ago, in the time of Madiba. It is one that we can showcase to the rest of the world as best practice and top of class. So today is indeed a historical moment. As with all history, of course, it comes with struggle. It's never handed on a platter. And this process that culminated in the Section 60 process that Mr. Richard described earlier did come with its fair measure of struggle, its fair measure of blood, sweat and tears. But I think we're all pleased and relieved for the sake of the game and also, again, for the nation that we've arrived at this point here today. I want to stress that the interim board is a short-term structure that was put in place as part of the minister's intervention, and I stress intervention as opposed to interference. It's an interim board that was appointed or became effective on the 15th of November. It received a very clear mandate and a very clear time frame in which to operate from the minister. The time frame was a minimum of 3 months and a maximum of 6 months. And we are still within that time frame, and the interim board hopes to complete its work, which will culminate, I'm hoping, Minister, in another press conference like this, where we can formally hand over the report that enumerates the various aspects you asked us to look into and to make recommendations, sustainable recommendations, to address the number of challenges, governance failures, and missteps that we saw historically. So that is for a different occasion. Why am I mentioning this today, ladies and gentlemen? I'm mentioning it because the number one point that the minister gave us in that mandate was the implementation of the Nicholson recommendations and the restoration of governance in cricket. Okay. The minister was very clear. I remember it was late on a Friday night, or early Friday evening in fact. He was very clear. He emphasized this continuously, and it resonated with the interim board. So we knew that the number one priority we have to deliver on is this particular one, implementing Nicholson. Now, in implementing the Nicholson recommendations, which each and every one of you in this press conference today will realize is work that was undertaken 9 years ago. So in effect, we've been delayed by 9 years. And a lot of things happen and a lot of things go wrong when you implement things. So the Minister also underlined and underscored the urgency of the matter. Because the more you leave governance skeptics in the lurch, the more you leave them in the lurch, the more the pressure accumulates, and eventually more the reputational damage accumulates as well. So I think we were quite clear as to what needed to be done and also the time frame that this had to be delivered in. Now, in implementing that first point, we also recognize that cricket is not just about a sporting code in the country. And that's why I think the Minister has, certainly in our opinion, one of the most important portfolios in government, because arts, culture and sport doesn't just speak to a sporting code. It speaks to social cohesion in the country. It speaks to uniting a nation. It speaks to affecting just about every social aspect in our society. So one can never talk about cricket as just affecting a small, narrow constituency. It's about 60 million South Africans. And I think the Minister has been very clear in certainly demonstrating that in the first instance, but also in the second instance, it's something that the interim board understood. We had to deliver for 60 million countrymen and countrywomen, not for any narrow-based constituency. And in doing that, of course, we also had to be clear that if you let down people, you're letting down 60 million people. You're letting down the country in terms of its global positioning. We should never, we should never for one moment underestimate the role that sport plays domestically and internationally in positioning our country, its reputation, its image. And that is some of the aspects that we took on board as an interim board and understood our mandate from there. It's very important to clear that. So let me, before I take you through some of the steps that were achieved, let me underscore one other aspect that is critical. You cannot position yourself in sport or the country globally if people have ongoing doubts about your governance. So everything, they say all roads lead to Rome. Well, I think all roads lead to governance as well. Because if you don't have governance, you cannot effect proper transformation. We know there are numerous challenges around transformation. But if this is not underpinned by transformation, transformation is always the nexus of everything. But it has to be underpinned by good governance. If you don't have that good governance, you're not going to succeed. So I wanted to just place in perspective how important this issue was of implementing Nicholson. It wasn't just about cricket or about a future board. It was about an entirety of a nation. And that's how we have to see it. So let me just very briefly take you through what happened over the past few days. It is not by now well rehearsed and well documented that we were at the edge of the cliff. We were millimeters, I don't even say centimeters, we were millimeters away from going off the edge of the cliff. And unfortunately, the cliff is a very steep one and not one that you can easily climb back. You can, but not with a lot of effort. We were facing a scenario, apocalyptic almost. Mr. Richards indicated that in a few months we'll be bidding for the World Cup, and please God we succeed. But none of these things would have been possible if we were off the cliff. And being at the edge of the cliff, your sponsors get nervous, your staff get nervous, and the country at large gets nervous. And we had to do something to pull back from the brink, pull back from the cliff. So what did we do? We got together after the so-called failed special general meeting. We got together with the Members' Council and we said, in the interest of the game and the nation, let's try and work through these issues. These issues that for 9 years have been a roller coaster ride. We need certainty, we need predictability. That's what sponsors, players, and everybody else wants. And we knew that our only option on advice was a Section 60 process. Section 60 of the Companies Act enables a round-robin resolution to pass both special and ordinary resolutions. And we embarked on a two-tier process. Tier 1 is get agreement on an amended memorandum of incorporation that is not a compromise. It is something that we want because it is good for governance. So there will be no compromises, shortcuts, things left out. I want to be very clear. This is a world-class document that we've agreed. This memorandum of incorporation is one we can take anywhere with the greatest pride. So no shortcuts, no compromises. I'm going to flag just 3 of the key principles that are contained in the amended MRI. The MRI will be made available to all members of the media in the spirit of transparency and accountability that we are embracing. I remember, Minister, when we took on the mandate, you said we must be transparent, and I think in the interest of transparency, we will make this document available today to all members of the media. You can see exactly where the amendments are, but let me just very quickly cover 3 fundamental key amendments. Amendment number 1 was to make provision for an independent majority board. We know that that is standard practice, it's governance 101. We've achieved that. So let me explain what we have exactly in the amended MRI. And this MRI incidentally became effective at 11 o'clock on Tuesday the 27th. Okay. So as of Tuesday the 27th, cricket has a new governance structure in place. What does this independent majority board look like? It will be a board of 15 for the first 3 years. And then again, taking our leave from government, where the President and Cabinet are saying that we must have structures that are efficient and are nimble and agile, the board composition will reduce to 13. So it will go from 15 to 13 after 3 years. The 15, let's dwell on the current. The 15 will be made up of 8 independent directors, 5 non-independent directors, and 2 executives. The 2 executives whom shall be the Chief Executive Officer and the Chief Finance Officer. So that will be the composition of 15, and that will be the board. As you can see, ladies and gentlemen, it is a majority independent board embracing all the governance principles we need to. Okay. So that was fundamental principle 1. Tick that box, it's in the MRI. Let's move to fundamental principle number 2. And that is that your chairman of your board must be independent. Okay, so how will that be achieved? That means that all 15 board members will vote and elect a chairman from within their midst. However, that chairman can only come from the 8 independent members. So if you're an executive or a non-independent, you don't qualify to be the chairman of the board or the chairperson of the board. Okay. So tick that box. We've achieved an independent chairperson, again embracing modern day governance. And then the last fundamental issue, because there's been a lot of criticism around 2 centres of power in cricket, as there are in many other parts of the country or many other agencies and the likes thereof, structures, formations. So in this instance, we had to have a clear role clarity and responsibility enumeration in the MRI. And that has also been achieved. So it's very clear what the role of the board is, And I won't talk about an interim board anymore, because after the AGM it's a permanent board, and our term in office will expire then, and there'll be a new board in place, and then the role and the role and responsibility of the members' council has also been enumerated. So there's very clear roles and responsibilities for the two. That is fundamental to governance, and also to ensuring that you don't have the problems we had and the troubles we had in the past. So those are the three main fundamental differences that you will find in this new document. Let me just lastly cover one or two other aspects that I think are important and have certainly been raised in part in the media, so let me cover them. So where do we go to from here now? We've got this new constitution, if you will, the MRI. The next step is that we have to go through a selection of independent directors. And those independent directors will be presented at the annual general meeting. Incidentally, the targeted date for the annual general meeting is the 12th of June. We will have it by no later than the 12th of June. We will deal with all the exigencies and the formalities around that. But on the 12th of June, the 15 directors will be appointed to the general meeting for approval. And they will then become appointed to the board, and that will be the new board. So the process that we're involved in right now is preparations for the AGM. It requires notice periods and various other statutory requirements. We are busy with that. Well, certainly the office is busy with that, the executives are. And secondly, the selection of independent directors. There, again, written in the MRI, is a process that needs to be followed. The process will be the following. We will appoint what we're calling an independent directors panel. This panel will be made up of 6 constituencies, 1 representative from each of these 6 constituencies. Constituency number 1 will be the Institute of Directors. Okay, we are about to speak to them to put forward a representative. Secondly, will be SAICA, the South African Chartered Accountants Institute. They have been spoken to already and are on board. The third is the Legal Practices Council, also spoken to, also on board. Then a person nominated by the Members' Council, a person nominated from the South African Cricketers Association, SACA, and this person must be either a male or female with international cricket experience. And then lastly, the former presidents of Cricket South Africa will appoint someone from within their midst, a former president in other words, to complete the 6th person on this panel. This panel has an established terms of reference that we are very close to finalizing. It will be finalized by Monday. The terms of reference will guide all the work of the panel. They will enjoy secretarial support from within the organization, and they will be given timelines, and they have to arrive at a point, we are aiming for 1 week before the AGM, where they have shortlisted from the midst of all the applications 8 independent directors that will be 8 independent nominee directors that will be put forward at the AGM for approval. Lastly, I'm just going to add that we did run a process by way of an advertisement asking for nominations, or applications I should say, for independent directors. That process closed some time ago, but that process did not have the benefit of the governance structure, the amended MOI that is currently in place. As a consequence, we have decided, following our own legal advice that we sought, we are reopening that process, and it will run until the 11th of May, and up until the 10th of May, apologies. It will run up until the 10th of May, midnight the 10th of May, and we will call for fresh applications. So anybody that applied previously, unfortunately, will have to reapply. There's a close-off date at midnight on the 10th, and those will be the applications that this panel I spoke about will consider. And from there, they will shortlist their 8 candidates. Okay. Ladies and gentlemen of the media, Minister, I'm going to stop there, or pause there at very least. I've attempted to set out the history of the moment, the importance of the moment, what it means for the country, our international positioning, and starting to restore some of the reputational damage that was done previously. I've also taken you through the process that arrived at this point, and also what is contained in this now what we deem to be a world-class document. And thanks very much for your attention.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Dr. Nicolau, for that very heartfelt address. Before I hand over to the Minister of Sport, Arts and Culture, ladies and gentlemen, I would just like to maybe indicate that over the last 6 months, I, for one, was one of the people that felt like how many of you who've expressed your sentiments that Minister is being too soft. Why is Minister being so patient? Do something. I was one of those people, believe it or not. But in retrospect, because we can only connect the dots looking back, I have the utmost respect for how this man has handled this situation. And I've realized that the minister is a man who respects processes. He believes in sport. He believes in cricket. Ideally, he would have wanted them to sort out their own problems on their own. But nonetheless, it came to this. And this is a day, as Dr. Nicolau has indicated, is a moment in history where moving forward, there will be change. Not only for this generation, but for the generations to come. And Minister didn't throw out the baby with the bathwater. He simply changed the water. On that note, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to hand over to the Minister of Sport, Arts and Culture, Nathi Mthethwa. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Master Chaba. Is it on? Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, Program Director, Master Chaba, and greetings to the Acting President, Mr. Richards, for Cricket South Africa, Members Council, Dr. Stavros Nicolau, Chairperson of the Interim Board of Cricket South Africa. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for inviting me to this meeting here. I didn't know what was the agenda, but you said I must come. So I've heard the agenda now, I've heard what you are saying. The materialist conception of history teaches us that everything is in a constant motion of change. Everything is subject to change, except change itself. Now, when that happens, change comes at a time and at a point where people are comfortable wherever they are and whatever they are doing. And when it comes, it moves things. It shakes trees. Sometimes it can be painful to those which change is affecting. But in the final analysis, nothing has to stay static. This is what befell cricket, because it's cricket we're talking about now, which is really fundamental transformation of all the social stations in our nation. In the sporting world, we're talking about cricket today, tomorrow we'll be talking about other sporting code and so on and so forth. But from our side, I believe we've said what we wanted to say. And we've never minced our words. We've never kept people guessing about our strategic objective. We've been open. The interim board is together with the members' council, the acting president here, is sharing with you part of what we gave them to deal with, which is the MOI. There are other points, there are other 8 points. And the acting chair, the chairperson of the interim board has informed us that they are still going to report on all other things. There's Fundutsi, there's this, that, and the other. There are many other things. But on this matter, this was a sticking point. To sum up all this process, this 6-month process, it was a matter of staying with the status quo or transforming. That was the choice. And we made it clear that we want transformation and nothing else. And I'm glad that the parties have found each other, they are singing from the same hymn book as we forge ahead to the AGM. We have to say that this is victory, put bluntly. Today is victory. The victor here are the players of cricket. The victor today is cricket itself and sports in general. The victor here today are the staff members of cricket. The victor are those parents, mothers and fathers who have written to me over a period of time asking that government save cricket from itself. Some have shared with the members' council the letters. The victor here are those administrators of cricket who have consulted with right from the beginning. The victors are those who want to see this country going forward, not backward. Those who are not going to be apologetic to forge ahead with transformation in this country. That's the victory. And it's the victory for the whole of the nation, the 60 million people of South Africa. It's the victory. Because what these two gentlemen have shared with us here is the modernized way of running cricket in South Africa, whose foundation is good governance. So we are at this point, it's a point which we have to learn from as we cast our eyes further to other sporting codes in the country and sport generally in the country. We have learned a lot. And I think that we now have to start that process of packing our bags as government and move aside so that sport works, continues, unhindered. And those who are still around, those who are experiencing this moment, and for posterity, people should know that for any good things or good thing to come about, there has to be a struggle. Unfortunately, not everyone would see the good thing. You know, we're just from Parliament, and somebody asked a question there that, but we hear that the minister had a gun, he put a gun on the head of Cricket South Africa and so on. Well, before I could respond, both Dr. Nicolau and Mr. Richards responded that they reached a consensus themselves. Their pressure was the pressure to do good in sport. I couldn't add anything because it was a matter of choice. Even those who think that they can still stand against this process, they must think again. Because this process was between life and death of cricket in South Africa. But as I said, thanks, gentlemen. I'll hear from you then when you give me the whole report. But on this one, I think that, as I said, we should actually, dedicate this to the people I've just mentioned. You had a very difficult situation in the country where players were worried about their future. In fact, one of the sport personality and commentator, Robert Marawa, was reminding us that players had to plead and say to sponsors that, no, please don't go. Now we are saying to sponsors and everybody else, this is a new way of doing things. This is the space they are going to be comfortable with to support sport, to support cleanliness in sport. And that's the way forward on this matter. Thank you very much, Program Director.
Thank you very much, Minister Natim Tetwa, Minister of Sport, Arts and Culture. Before I hand over to our virtual online host, I'd like to just take some questions from the floor as we are live right here from Johannesburg at the Cricket South Africa offices. Are there any questions before I hand over to the journalists that are joining us online? Yes, ma'am. Hloni, ENCA.
Good afternoon, Minister, Mr. Richards and Dr. Nicolau. My questions are to Mr. Richards. Sorry, the first one is, you heard the Minister and the DG of Sport explaining the SASCOC situation this morning in that portfolio committee meeting. But just what is Cricket South Africa's understanding of the SASCOC involvement in this matter? And then to Dr. Nicolau, just in terms of that layout of the structure between the Members' Council and the new board, what exactly is it? I understand that it will come out in the MOI, but just can you give us an indication of where that leaves the Members' Council then, given all the months of what has been happening?
Thank you, Hloni. We'll leave it right there and just give an opportunity for response. Yes, sir. Go right ahead.
Thank you, Tony. I think his cricket position is very clear. We are still a member in good standing with SASCOC. We have submitted our revised MOI. Naturally, the process is that in terms of their constitution, that they should approve. But naturally, we could not hold back. we needed to forge our way forward, which might bring us and lead us into a conflict with SASCOC. But it's a matter we will deal with at that stage. We would not like to speculate on. I always believe that we will deal with the situation as it unfolds. But we have to act like we said is what is the best for us as a game at this moment. So that's the best way I can answer you, though.
Thank you very much. Dr. Nicolau?
Thanks, Program Director. And I think Kleini, before I respond to you, let me also take this opportunity of thanking the media in the preceding period. I think, again, we saw transparency and, the role of the media very often is to enhance public good. And I think, by and large, many of you did that in this process. So let me thank you, firstly, before I respond. Secondly, Hloni, the role, clarity and responsibility that I was speaking about earlier delineates what the roles will be for the board, and the board will be seized with running the day-to-day or having oversight of the day-to-day operations of the company, because it is a company, it's a business, and it will have responsibility for or making the executives and management accountable. So the normal day-to-day operations that you have with any company, the oversight will be provided by the board, okay, as it should be. And if I put it differently, where we were previously, the shareholders were partly running the company with a board. You cannot have that. So now there is clear lines of responsibility and accountability. The members' council, who are the shareholders de facto, will be seized with cricketing matters. So there's a clear separation now of the two. And of course this is detailed a little more than I'm explaining it in the MRI. But that's the fundamental issue here, is you've got the separation of the two.
All right. Thank you very much, Dr. Nicolau. Good sir, please, if you would introduce yourself, your organization, and proceed to your question.
Good afternoon. My name is Kaniso Chwapo, and I'm from Sport 24. My question is for Minister Mteto Nyambose. With regards to what has taken, we listened through the meeting, the Parliamentary Sports Committee meeting, where SASCOC tried to clear their role in terms of how to manage MOI processes. My question now would be, with the fact that an MOI process has now been pretty much sorted without the absence, what is the future role in terms of sorting such matters out?
I don't know. I don't know. SASCOC must respond to that. But there's no way that this process will go back. But maybe there's a miracle or something. I don't know.
Thank you very much. Do we have any more questions before I hand over to the virtual questions that will be directed by Michael Owen Smith, who is from Cricket South Africa? May I kindly hand over? Okay. On this note, I'd like to hand over to Michael Owen Smith from Cricket South Africa, who is our online host, to take questions from the journalists that are joining us virtually. Over to you, Michael.
Thank you, Mr. Chaba, and good afternoon to everybody, and welcome to the media to this Q&A session. I think we're all well aware of the Zoom protocols. In other words, keep your microphones muted unless you're called in to put a question. And then if you could just indicate which panel member you wish to address your question. We'll kick off straight away. Colin Bryden, you're first on the list. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Michael. I guess to Mr. Richards, which World Cup are we thinking of bidding for? And is it a men's World Cup? Is it the 50 overs World Cup? Maybe you can just elaborate, and for what year you are hoping to host it.
Thank you very much, Colin. The process is now going to be unfold at an ICC level, that the World Cups to be scheduled for the next 8 years. The bidding process will start very shortly, and I can be corrected, it will be before the end of October. So naturally, we are going to target both men's, women's, and under-19 World Cups. because we believe that we are going to go very heavy for the men's. We specifically are interested in one specific, but it's not restricted to that. We're looking, and I don't know, yes, in 2027. We believe it would be an ideal opportunity, as we had not hosted one in 24 years, for the World Cup to come back to South Africa. But there are also many others, both in the T20 roles as well, so we won't be restricting ourselves to one bid only. I hope that answers you, Colin.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rian. We go to Craig Ray next. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon to the panel. Minister SASCOC stated today that they thought this MOI was setting a bad precedent, or a precedent that they weren't comfortable with. Is it your vision to have all sporting bodies follow Nicholson and a majority independent board? That's the question to you. And then just for Dr. Nicolau, how long is the Directors' Nomination Committee going to be in place? I mean, is it only for this particular board, or will it always be used in future for future board nominations? Thank you.
Well, thanks, Craig. No, this development sets a good precedent, not a bad one. A good Nicholson report. Remember that Nicholson's principles are not an anathema to good governance, as witnessed in King 3 and King 4. So the principle here is the one of separation of powers, the one of independence in the boards. It's a good precedent. Other sporting codes, for instance, SASCOC, we still have to get to SASCOC on Zulman report. So there are different mechanisms and tools for different sports and so on. But where government in particular has spent the public funds, would want value for that money.
Okay, if I can come in, Craig, and respond to your question. So this panel is a once-off panel. It gets replaced henceforth by a nominations committee, which again is contained in the amended MOI. So henceforth, after the appointment of this board, you will have a nominations committee, as you would have to any other board and any other company that would henceforth handle future board appointments.
Thank you, Stavros. We now move on to Nathan Gugela, please.
Good afternoon, everyone. My question is for the Honourable Minister. With a government intervention taking place and you, Honourable Minister, exercising your powers as the Minister, as stated in the Constitution, what will this mean going forward for all sporting codes in terms of governance and administration? We are well aware that CSA in particular has been under spotlight over the last few years, if you take into consideration the initial implementation of the Nicholson policy. Can you elaborate further the key points other sporting codes in South Africa can take out of this in terms of maladministration in governance and the repercussions that come with it, including and not limited to transformation? Thank you.
Well, what they can take from this process is that it's always better to act without any intervention. I don't know, amongst the two gentlemen here, somebody did say that as government we're reluctant to get into the fray because we believed that cricket, South Africa itself, should be able to resolve its issues. But when they failed to resolve their issues, in fact they made things worse and cricket going down the drain in front of our very eyes. We then, following the law, even at that point, there were calls that government must intervene. We said, no, wait. You know, there is the Confederation of Sport here in South Africa, which is SASCOC. And SASCOC could not resolve this matter. Actually, they failed. And they took it back to the minister themselves. So you can see that it's a whole process. What other sporting codes should learn is that don't wait for any intervention, for any government intervention. Just move and transform, both in the field of play and administratively, so that we as government are at arm's length with what is happening in different sporting codes. And I hope people would listen, because this is what we have said to Cricket South Africa much earlier. The problem is that when we plead and we nudge people to do the right thing, that pleading is, you know, misconstrued as a sign of weakness. I think people, they are used to people who bang tables and so on. We don't do that. We've got to face the challenges and work for a solution together with the people. It's only when those people feel that they want to defy and do their own thing, then we have to come and intervene. But I hope we are not going to be asked to intervene in any other sporting code. People are going to be following what is correct, starting with the Confederation, which is SASCOC itself. That the clarity with which the Zulman report states its way is going to be respected and be followed. This thing that we hear people talking about, that no, sport must be run by sport people, sportsmen and women and so on. What is it that it has brought to sport in South Africa? What is it that it has brought to Cricket South Africa as an example? And by the way, Cricket South Africa is not an exception, because you hear most of what is happening within the sporting world from sportsmen and women, and in most cases when they have retired. You then get the horrors, some of the horror stories which are happening. And you can't just sit by as government and say, no, sport people would run sport, even they running it down the drain and running it to hell. We can't do that.
Thank you, Minister. Next question is from Ken Boland, please.
Thanks, Michael. Afternoon, all. To Dr. Nicolau, just a couple of questions, please, on the nomination of independent directors. You say the independent directors panel will present a shortlist of 8 for approval, but it's exactly 8 that need to be elected anyway. So why not a shortlist of, say, 10 or 12 that the, I presume it's the members' council that then votes to approve the independent directors. What happens if those nominations aren't approved at the AGM? And then also you say this one-sort panel will be replaced by a nominations committee. Will that nominations committee be set up the same way, those 6 different constituencies that you mentioned earlier?
Okay. Ken, thanks for those questions. Let me start with the latter question on the nominations committee. So the composition of the board and its structure has been styled on Kings 3 and Kings 4, on the Companies Amendment Act, and on best governance practice. So the nominations committee would be made up futuristically from the board And that nominations committee, as is the case with all nominations committees on boards, would be responsible for futuristically replacing directors. So if you have a resignation of a director during the term of office, not at the end of the term, then that nominations committee would be responsible for selecting a suitable replacement. A nominations committee, of course, also looks at things like board rotation. It's not good practice to keep directors in place indefinitely. So that is the role and the purpose of the nominations committee. They will play that role, including looking at things like board rotation. With respect to the number of candidates that get put forward at the AGM, it will also be like any other AGM, where you have a list of the exact quantum of directors that you need. So it will be 8 in this instance that will be put forward. In future years, when you reduce down to 13, it will become 7 that will be put forward. But I should also hasten to add that you are appointing the entire new board on the 12th of June. 12th of June. It's not just the independents that you're appointing. You're appointing all 15 directors at the AGM on the 12th of June. Thanks very much, Ken.
Thank you. We'll move on to Tinus van Staden, please.
Thank you, Michael. Just one for Dr. Nicolau. Also, it's a follow-up on this one, and maybe also for for Mr. Richards. Regarding the non-independents, who will those people also come from within the members' council itself, like it's always been? Will the members' council put forward names? How's that going to work, the non-independents? And then just has the interim board's term been extended now again until the AGM? Thank you.
Okay, so Tinus, firstly, let me start with who will nominate or who will put forward the members, the non-independent directors. It will be the members' council. So they would put those 5 names forward to the AGM. Secondly, the term of this board ends on this interim board ends on the 14th of May. That's exactly 6 months. It's in about 2 weeks' time. There is an option that some or all of the board members approach again the minister and in line with the now amended MRI, the members' council, and seek an extension. That's one way of managing it. There are other options. The most expedient way would be to seek an extension of another 3.5 weeks, which takes you to the 12th of June. And of course, you need an interim structure so that you are compliant with governance. You don't need the entire interim board to satisfy that, incidentally. So to the extent that there are interim board members that can simply not extend beyond the 14th, there are considerations on how to deal with that. So thanks very much, Tinus, for that question as well.
Rian, do you want to say anything, as he did put that question to you also?
Yes, thank you, Michael. Tinus, the one thing that is noticeably different in this MOI, that it doesn't preclude anybody. The nominations comes via the affiliates themselves, but it's not restricted to anybody. So you could result in people from various sectors coming through that system as well. There's no restrictions on it must be a president, or so it's a very broad definition of a non-independent as well.
Thank you, Rian. The next question comes from Tiesetso. Tiesetso Malepa, are you there? we seem to have lost him for the moment. We can always come back to him. In the meantime, let's go on to 12 for advice, please.
Thank you, Michael. This is a question for Dr. Nicolau. Can you tell us whether there will still be a president of CSA? And would that person be different from the chair of CSA? And if that is the case, where would the president come from? And also in terms of things like going to the ICC, who would go to the ICC and argue on South Africa's behalf for hosting a World Cup? Would it be, if there is a separate president, would it be the president or the chairman?
Okay, Telford, thanks. Those are excellent questions. So let me, as I alluded to earlier, there's a very clear role for the board now and a very clear role for the Members' Council. The chairman and the president cannot be the same person. The chairman of the board will come from the independent segment of the board through the process I indicated earlier. You will still have a president who's a president of the Members' Council. The two are not going to be and cannot be the same person for all the obvious governance reasons that I set out earlier. In respect of who would represent Cricket South Africa and the country at large at the ICC, okay, the board would have that responsibility, and it does not have to be the chairman of the board. The board would look and say, well, who is the most suitably appropriate person with the skill sets and requirements of that person, and that person would then be duly appointed to represent Cricket South Africa at the ICC.
Back to Stavros. Ashfaq Mohammed.
Thank you, Michael. To the Minister and the Cricket South Africa panelists, we said earlier about Dr. Nicolau said that transformation is at the nexus of everything that you guys are doing, and that's part of the reason why all of these governance issues have now been resolved. The Minister also spoke about the orders of the past of players. We know the issues about not getting enough opportunities, perhaps guys, black players going on tour and hardly playing and then drop for the next tour. How do we avoid those kind of horrors happening and ensuring that everybody gets an equal opportunity? And then secondly, to the Minister, just on a broader scale in terms of sport in South Africa, when will fans be allowed in any capacity to attend matches at stadiums, particularly with the rugby Rainbow Cup starting now and the British and Irish Lions tour coming up? Thank you.
Well, thanks, Ascot, and thanks for your question. Everything starts with leadership. Those people who are suffering and who have raised things, players and everybody else, will depend more on leadership. Leadership which is of quality, leadership which would know when and how to intervene, and so on. So all depends on that. That's why the governance, this new governance model is quite important for that. On the second question, on the fence, you would recall that earlier on, after March last year, when the President proclaimed the national disaster, COVID-19 pandemic, there was this time where everything came to a standstill, including play itself. The sporting fraternity took it upon themselves to understand the situation, and was able to make a case to government for opening up play and going back to play. And it was upon that government, particularly from the health perspective, was able to look at the plan and be able to say, well, the plan is good, and therefore we can go back to play. Similarly, this time around, with everything we do, we are guided by health protocols, epidemiologists, and so on, the clinicians. Those are the people who are guiding us now. It's not a matter of a minister of sport who would say, no, fans, go back. What if that becomes a super spreader? So we are guided here. And in this guidance, we are informed that between May and July, we are facing a possibility of a third wave. Now, that should guide us. We can't, in the midst of a third wave, and just get people and go and kill them. So we are guided. I must mention the fact that both the creative events sector and sporting sector have come together, they've put together a plan. For instance, when it comes to rugby, the Irish and British tours, for instance, they are proposing that we get at least 50% of the spectators back to stadia. Well, that is being looked into, but it must answer the question. If you take FNB, which has 90,000 people, and you say 50%, which is 45,000 people, how are you going to ensure that that opening up is not a super spreader? So those questions have to be answered. Like they did in the past, when it comes to football, for instance. They came with the concept of bio-bubble and so on, and it was an attractive concept. And it has been able to be implemented, and it worked. But right now, we do not decide as individual departments of sport, of tourism. Within the Command Council, we are guided by the health situation. So health situation is going to guide us. Now, taking all of these things into cognizance, especially the fact that we are these guys, these doctors are saying that we are going to be facing a storm of the third wave. So what do? Do we say then that regardless of that, people must just go flock to stadium? And will we be able to pay when they die? No, we don't have those resources as government. We are guided. No individual minister is going to come up with an answer on this matter. But the weekly meeting of the National Command Council, looking at this matter, will always guide the entire society, not one aspect of society. Thank you very much for your question, Ascot.
Thank you very much, Minister. We're running out of time, but we can just fit in one last question from Stuart Hess, and then we'll wrap up. Thank you, Stuart.
Thanks, Michael. I think this is for Dr. Nicolau. The Cricket SA currently has an acting CEO, and I see on the board the CEO. Must that person be appointed full-time before they can serve on the board, or does the board go through a process after the AGM to appoint a permanent CEO?
Okay, Stuart, thanks. Hopefully I've understood your question correctly. So, as you point out, there's an acting CEO right now, and I assume one of the priorities, in fact I don't assume, I know, one of the priorities of the new board will be to look to appoint a permanent CEO. Right? So the board makes provision, the new board makes provision for two executives. That would be a chief executive officer and a chief financial officer. Those two would be the two executives that serve on the board. And of course, if you have someone acting, as an acting CFO it could be, then those powers are delegated to that acting person, and that acting person serves on the board for that period of time. Of course, if the acting person is not the person that becomes permanent, they would drop off the board when you get a permanent person. Or if that acting person is appointed as the permanent CEO or CFO, then that person will continue to serve on the board. So hopefully, Stuart, that answers your question. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Stavros, and thanks very much to our panel, Minister Mtetwa, to Dr. Stavros, and to Rian Richards for everything's been very open and clear, and I think the media have a very good understanding now of everything that has happened and the way we're all going forward. I thank you all for your attendance, the media, stakeholders, our panel, and have a good afternoon further. Thank you very much, and goodbye.
Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. This brings us to the close of our press briefing. A hearty thanks to our Minister of Sport, Arts and Culture, Nathi Mtetwa. Thank you very much. History has indeed been rewritten, and it is a proud moment for cricket lovers, for South Africans, and for the world over as well. Thank you to the media. Thank you very much to our panel. Thank you to the Cricket South Africa Members Council. Thank you to the interim board. Sanity has finally prevailed. Good afternoon. Thank you.